Hey, Kathie Nurena.
Hey, Linda. How are you?
I'm doing really well. And it's so nice to talk to you again.
It is.
Yeah. And this time, I was hoping we could have a little talk about emotions in dogs and whether or not those emotions are contagious to people or whether our emotions are contagious to our dogs.
It's
And
an interesting topic.
yeah, yeah, I think it is. And it's something anecdotally that I think we talk about all the time. What got me thinking about this was especially during the pandemic, we're doing curbside service. Are you doing curbside service?
Not at this time. They did have our office with the newborns where it was a little bit curbside service.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting because I thought your answer was going to be no. Hmm. Okay. And one client in particular really stood out to me because when we went out to get her dog and ask her questions, she was really upset. And she said, I didn't know you were going to take my dog away from me. I thought you were going to do everything here at the car. And we explained how it worked. And she was adamant that it was the worst thing we could ever do to her or her dog, but especially her dog. Her dog derived comfort from her. She was thinking of herself kind of as an emotional support human for her dog, and how terrified he was going to be at the hospital. And the situation was difficult because she was adamant she wasn't leaving. She was adamant the dog could not be taken away from her. And and I use that term loosely, but as a hospital, we were adamant she was unable to come in.
Right.
In the end, we did take the dog in and had a hysterical client outside, even though, we take videos and we do everything we can to contact them. So that situation was not only uncomfortable, but just felt almost wrong in a sense, and got me thinking about our emotions and our dog's emotions and how we, in a sense, as species, view each other. And I did some research on it. So, what I'd like to do is just really superficially and briefly go over these three research pieces.
I always love hearing the research you found. You find the best stuff.
Thank you. And before I start, I just also want to say superficially that emotions are born in the amygdala, a part of the brain. And something will happen with no inherent emotional value. In other words, it's neutral. And in the amygdala, it becomes paired with an event which is either aversive or pleasant. And that pairing is what, for right now, we're going to call an emotion. It is an emotion, but it has a lot to do with emotional memory as well. So there's more to it. And it is plastic and it can be changed or modified. So the first study I want to review is out of Austria. And the setup there is that there are several speakers, audio speakers, set up behind a wall so that they can't be seen and the person manipulating them can't be seen. And on the other side of the same wall is an owner and a dog, or are an owner and a dog. And the sounds are then radiated, we'll say, between speakers. So they'll come out of one speaker, they can come out of one of the other speakers, and so they'll move, the sound moves back and forth. Emotional sounds are used, and that would be sounds such as laughing or crying in the case of humans. And then they also use canine sounds, and that would be a play bark or maybe an isolation whine, and that's how you want to think of those. There were other sounds, but think of those. And then there were also neutral sounds, and those were rain, soft raindrops, the sounds of crickets chirping, blackbirds singing, and interestingly to me, the sound of a human female voice that is very soothing and neutral. The results were that there was no statistical difference in the dog's reaction between the human sounds and the canine sounds. The sounds, if they were positive, we'll say, or pleasant to the dog, then the dog would sit up, take notice, and would sometimes move towards the sound.
Mhm.
And just you could see a more relaxed attitude. And definitely they would orient to the speaker that the sound was coming out of. If the sounds were negative, the dogs would freeze. They would give all sorts of worry indicators, and they would refuse to look at their owner.
Mm.
If the sounds were neutral, there was no difference between any of the neutral sounds. The dog just kept doing whatever it was doing when the sound came on and didn't really react or react with any difference. So that, to me, was interesting because that study showed that the dogs would react to human emotional sounds the same way they react to canine emotional sounds. So we'll move on then to the second study. And this studied long-term stress in dogs and in humans and when they're together. And this is a study out of Sweden, and they measured hair cortisol levels because those cortisol levels go into your hair follicles, into the hair, and can be measured in time increments. Think about circles on trees.
Yeah.
When you define an era, you're defining a time. And they took pet dogs and competition dogs, mostly agility and obedience dogs. And they were a mix of breeds and genders. And the dogs wore an activity-based collar, uh, cloud, cloud-based fitness collar, basically. And that monitored their activity during the time of the study. And the studies went on for a week during each season for 2 years. So you've got 4 weeks of the year for 2 years. Both the human and the dogs also took personality tests. Yes, there are dog personality tests. Uh, the data that they received was very detailed. They took cortisol levels, as I say, they're taking hair during those weeks.
Mhm.
And the results were that activity level did not affect the hair cortisol levels. So whether the dog was being trained every day, was in competition, or whether it was a pet dog laying on the couch and taking walks in the park, the activity level didn't affect the cortisol levels. The dog's personality had little effect on the cortisol levels.
That's interesting.
However, the human personalities had a significant effect on the cortisol levels. And we're talking the cortisol levels in the dogs and the people,
Wow.
not just taking cortisol levels from the dog. And the stress hormones were synchronized, cortisol, that was synchronized between the dogs and the people. And the dogs mirrored the humans. The humans did not mirror the dogs. If the humans were stressed and had high cortisol levels, the dogs were stressed and had high cortisol levels.
That's really interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought that the performance dogs would have shown more stress, say during performance, but they didn't unless the human was stressed. So let's move on then to the third study. And this is a third study from Japan. And this study used heart rate variability instead of cortisol levels because this study was looking at the effects of stress on people and their dogs on a moment-to-moment basis, as opposed to the last study, which was a long-term thing, did over long-term, over duration. And everybody, listen to me, the humans and the dogs, both species, wore heart monitor while this was going on. And the setup was this: there's a room with a panel of people in it, and then there's the caretaker and his or her dog close together. The human had some activities to perform. First of all, they had 5 minutes to read a document. And then they had 5 minutes in which to verbally explain that document to the panel of people that were there.
Okay.
And then in the next 5 minutes, they had to verbally perform mental arithmetic. And every time they made a mistake, one of the panel members would turn to a whiteboard and write "error" on the board. So that was the setup.
Stress.
Yeah, I'm feeling stressed just thinking about it. The ECGs were then compared between the people and their dogs. And the dogs responded exactly the way the people responded.
Fantastic.
The heart rate variability had a very strong transfer human to dog. However, and this was the main focus of the study after determining that, was they then wanted to know how long the dog and the human had cohabitated.
Okay.
The longer they were together, the stronger the likelihood and the strength was of the heart rate variability synchronization. So with this, they not only determined that the human personality, as evidenced by the high cortisol levels in the previous study, were very significant. The length of time that the dog and human had been together was even stronger.
That's kind of nice. Building bonds over time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's nice if the
If you have
people.
heart rate to share with your dog.
Right. But if
Yes.
you're always a stressed person, you've got a stressed dog. And so as dog trainers, think of the number of times where we might have trainer talks. And in that talk, we say, well, she's so stressed, she's got to be the other end of the leash, as Patricia McConnell might say. We've got to be communicating that through the leash to her dog. Well, interestingly, it's not necessarily, it's not through the leash, just by being a stressed human. Mhm. And I can think of some people that I know who've had 3 or 4 dogs, and every single one of those dogs has been a stressed dog or had the same reactivity
Yeah.
or something. And so just to circle back to what got me interested in this in the first place, the end of my story is that once that dog got into the hospital, that dog was a different dog than we had ever seen before. It was calm. We did everything we needed to do. There were no issues. He didn't try to bite us, didn't whine. And everything that had been happening with that dog that we wanted to medicate for, trazodone, something before the dog came in, was due to this very panicked owner, now out in the car, panicked because the dog didn't have her for comfort, when in reality, the owner was the cause of the dog's discomfort.
It's a tough situation.
It's a very hard situation. And do we go out and say to our client, well, Sophie was fine in the hospital because you weren't with her? No.
Right.
But
But
it's
it's
the
nice
truth.
having continuity with people, with patients, that sometimes you can offer them perhaps another perspective, where if you think about it this way, you
Yeah.
can almost get them to try these things maybe with patients, like, oh, she may be better if you're not there.
Yes, which we often would do in the exam room if the dog is being resource guarding
Right,
his or her caretaker. And we'll say, is it all right if? We always ask the question, because if that's a case where it is a yes or no question, no, don't take my dog away from me.
right.
But if they say yes, and we take them out and they're doing well, we always tell them, well, much more relaxed. In a way, we try to say it in a way that we hope will encourage the person to say, well, if my dog's more relaxed, I'm not more relaxed when he's away from me, but go ahead. But then they have to believe us,
Right.
or we have to video,
Mm-hmm.
which is where it's coming now. Before they would just believe us. And now we have to show proof. So that's emotional contagion
Really?
in dogs.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that was a kind of a tentative good. Were you thinking of something that you have something to say about it?
No, I'm really just thinking about the whole thing, and kind of, because the conversations can go on and on. So
Oh, yeah.
don't want to stop, but we don't want to go on forever. Um,
Well, actually, we do want to go on forever, but we won't. Okay. Okay. Well, have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, let's see. I can never stop